Hello and welcome to the Monday Morning Mixtape, the only podcast that will fulfill all your musical desires. On this week's show, we're going to be talking about Metallica's classic Master of Puppets, and we're also going to be discussing other thrash bands, including the Big Four, and recommending some thrash metal music for you to listen to on your way back to work after your isolation. So yeah, stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. I like the way we started off this podcast where it was going to be, we're going to be exploring different genres of music. So far we've done a load of stuff on Metallica, Danzig. It's been primarily metal kind of things, and this week's kind of one is Metallica's Master of Puppets as well. We're going to be talking about thrash metal. So
right, so next week we do Beethoven.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a look back on this. Yeah, Baby's Gone Black.
Sebastian Bach.
Indeed.
But
How Salieri was robbed.
Indeed.
What?
Or the conspiracy theory of Avril Lavigne.
Yes.
Oh yeah, okay.
She never existed.
That we should do that actually. Some of the conspiracy theories about it. That's one of my favourite ones actually, about that Avril Lavigne.
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of conspiracy theory stuff lately.
And there was another one. I remember looking at an interview with Andrew
Swift, wasn't it?
She's in the Illuminati, I think, is Taylor Swift's one. But there was one about Andrew WK. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all. Where he was on Larry King. Larry King does this 10 questions at the end of the really fat, and he was like, "Are you in the Illuminati? Have you replaced the original Andrew WK?" And he was like, "What?" And he was like, "I'm sick of answering this." He said, "People keep thinking that kind of like I murdered the original Andrew WK and took." And he's like, "I'm the same person. I'm just older."
There is a thing called aging, you know.
But for it to come up in Larry King,
that's bizarre. Yeah. Especially Larry King, like the Goblin King, entirely out of leather.
When you said that, kind of all that went through my mind was that Screen Rant thing where I just want to go, wow.
Indeed.
Yes.
Anyway.
But yes, on with the show.
On with the show.
So I suppose we kick it off straight away with classic album, which is kind of going to kind of colour the rest of the show. Metallica's Master of Puppets.
Indeed.
For people who don't know, Metallica are a heavy metal music band.
And where have you been hiding that you are unaware of Metallica?
Based out of the San Francisco Bay Area originally, who ended up going on becoming one of the biggest bands in the fucking world.
Originally based out of LA, but moved to San Francisco.
Yeah, but we're not getting into it. We did Laura did a thing about the history of Metallica a while ago. But basically this is their third studio album.
Pronounce it properly.
Third studio album. I think this is where they kind of went off and they really started developing the whole Metallica sound and kind of like exploring different genres and putting a lot more in to it. It was released in 86, if I remember
86.
correctly. Yeah, and it would have been the last album that Cliff Burton played on and had. Other than Gang, there was some of the stuff on and Justice for All that would have been written by Cliff Burton, which carried over to it. But I think it got put into the National Recording Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. The first metal,
first metal album ever.
It's quite a big record. I think it would have. It definitely blew the door open for Metallica and for a lot of other bands. But I suppose before we get into it, because like the lads wouldn't, Jen in particular, would not be someone who goes off listening to Metallica on a regular basis.
Or any kind of thrash metal in general.
I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it, to be honest. I suppose I would kind of consider myself to be fairly broad in my music listening, but I wouldn't have kind of been a fan of anything kind of heavy in any regard before, or rock like. But yeah, so it's kind of funny because from listening to Metallica, I remember when I was younger, I did kind of dabble in a little bit of kind of, rock and kind of punk and stuff. So it was a bit kind of an eye opener for me in that sense. But yeah, so I kind of was listening to the album when I was like, washing the dishes or just going for a walk and stuff. And I found myself kind of just repeating it a couple of times because I was like, this is really, really good. The sound was good. It's nice for just kind of listening to, but also if you want to go for like a run or, you actually want to bop to it. It's pretty, really interesting and fun. I love the lyrics, the sound, everything. Just really well put together album.
I think that's the thing with it. It's masterfully crafted album.
Very.
Where like the songs all kind of like, and we'll get into what we're talking about, like the making of it and stuff a little bit, but like it really is an intelligently put together album that they wanted to flow a certain way.
It's one of these albums you can actually genuinely say all killer, no filler, because there's no dross on the album, there's no wastage, there's nothing there that shouldn't be there, basically.
There's a lovely flow to it.
I was just actually thinking that, because in previous times when we brought up an album, best case scenario would be like, I liked most of it, but there were still some things that wasn't great, or I liked some of it and I didn't like some of this. But with this album, and just kind of for a bit of reference, I wouldn't be the biggest Metallica fan. I wouldn't have been a huge Metallica fan actually at all, but I would have had some of their songs kind of on my liked playlists and going through, and I'd really like those songs, but I wouldn't have just delved deep into them. And this would have been probably the first deep delve of an
proper full album.
Exactly, yeah. And I felt the exact same, that when I was listening through this, there wasn't any point in it that felt like a lull in the album or that was slow or jarring. It was like good from kind of start to finish. And what really surprised me about that was that most of the songs are like either 5 or 8, like I think it's either like 8 minutes or 2 or 3 of the songs. Some of them are 5 minutes, and the minimum is like 4 minutes or something like that. Like they're long ass songs, but they don't really have any lulls in the song or in the album at all.
And I found as well that I didn't feel the need to skip anything.
That was going to be my next thing. There's no song in the album that you kind of go, oh fuck it, I'll skip to the next song. Every single one you go, no, actually I really like this one, I'll let this one play through.
Yeah, for Metallica, this is like their jump from being an underground thrash metal band and a heavy metal band to being a band, kind of like this brought kind of like metal into the mainstream as well, and like people were like, oh my god, this is actually really intelligent, singing is good, lyrics are good.
I think
a lot of the songs are based
more accessible to other listeners. I don't know, it just felt to me as if it wasn't too heavy. I had listened to some of their previous albums. They did feel a little bit heavier to me. This particular album felt like it was slightly lighter in order to kind of, attract new listeners.
No, at the time this would have been like the heaviest thing out there. There would have been.
So?
Oh yeah, it would have been. Yeah, I remember when it came out.
Yeah.
There was nothing like
well,
this
I suppose
before.
if you compare it to the likes of Kill 'Em All, I mean, you do have you have Welcome Home Sanitarium. You do have, you've got that soft.
There were softer songs in it, and that was a big thing. That they were scared that. Well, they weren't scared. They didn't give a fuck because they were like, we're just going to do what we want to do.
So
we want to do intelligent music, and we're going to kind of structure it the way we want. But it was this whole thing that metal at the time was always like, at that stage with thrash, was play fast, play heavy, and then they started constructing that they weren't 2-minute songs, and it was like there would have been a lot of people would have been like, oh fuck Metallica, they're going off. But it introduced really, critics kind of went, oh my god, this metal stuff is intelligent.
And what's actually interesting about it is around that time, now I'm not crediting into Metallica, because I'm not actually sure, but around that time, there was that switch from going from your 2-minute, maybe even 3-minute max songs to longer songs that they just wanted, they didn't want to, compress it down or cut bits out. If the song felt like it needed to be longer, if it was longer, if it was shorter, it was shorter.
With thrash metal, it would have been a different, but
but not just that, I think in other genres
just
as well,
in general, pop, pop is always a 3-minute song, and that's it for the radio.
Well, you had them with prog rock before that. Like prog rock, you could have 14-minute long songs and stuff. But it was after that. That was after really falling out of favour, kind of in the 80s.
Yeah, but that's the thing. As Mark was saying, Metallica are nope, the song is however long the song is going to be, and that's it. And if the structure calls for an 8-minute long song with a soft section in the middle and build back to kind of a loud ending, that's what it is, and that's what it's going to be.
Well, actually, just a bit of a call.
Because you can see the inverse actually happening now because of the new structure. Kind of with streaming services and whatnot, the way it's you get paid fractions of a cent per play or something like that. A lot of like artists are trying to like, you know, make their songs smaller and smaller to come like so that if I get it smaller, then someone might listen to it twice, but they only listen to it once, so I get 2 plays out of it and stuff like that. And it's just a lot of that is what you were saying earlier on, pop artists, but it's not just locked into pop artists because of how the kind of domain is changing. But your more established artists, they can avoid it, but with younger or new upcoming artists, they're kind of having to play with it a little bit, to a degree anyway. And
that are just in it for the money. The uncreative cunts.
Jesus.
But I mean, the whole thing with this album as well, for them, that they like had a very much an idea what they wanted to do, because they recorded a lot of it when they were on the road, at least demos for it. And the recording process with Metallica still, well, I think it changed slightly over the years, but the main songwriters are James and Lars, the drummer. James will do the lyrics and he'll do the main guitar bits and stuff, but Lars seems to be the brains, kind of like insofar as he pieces everything together. And so then you have like Kirk and at the
so he'd be kind of like the conductor of them all.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. And then the others would go off and they'd record bits and pieces, like just solo bits on tape, and then they'd come on and they'd try and put them all together, because you know that's what they used to do. But it kind of like they must have had an idea where they were going with, kind of like, say, and some kind of prog influence as well. Because originally they wanted Geddy Lee, who was like the bass player and the singer for Rush, to produce the album. But I think when they were looking into it, it was like they could do, because they had it in their head that the longer they could spend in the studio, the better the album would be. So the more studio time they had, the better. So they could do either a month in LA or they could do 3 months over in Denmark. And they went for the 3 months over in Denmark.
That's because, I mean, they would have recorded Ride the Lightning over there before in the recording studio in Sweet Silence. So, like, they knew the setup, they knew they could get the sound they wanted. So they're like, right, we're going to go for that, and we're going to spend all the time in the studio we can, just making sure everything is as tight as possible, basically.
So what I think from looking at a documentary on the main way that they used to do it was they'd have the bones of the song, they put it together. Then they play 1 day a week, they dedicate to each song, they keep coming back to it, trying to make it better and better and better and better. And the only song that they didn't actually have written before they went in was The Thing That Should Not Be, which we'll go through all the songs individually, because there's not many songs on it, and they're all quite big. But as well, then the reception to it, of course, when it did come out, it fucking just blew people critically and culturally acclaimed. I think it's one of the biggest selling metal albums
continues
of all
to
time.
keep on rolling back into
other
the
than
charts.
the Black Album,
which is another Metallica album.
But as well, kind of like instead of, they were kind of being pushed to promote it by doing music videos, what a lot of bands were doing at the time, and they were like, no, we're going to tour. So they went on tour with Ozzy, and then they went on the Swedish tour, which was kind of like where Cliff Burton had the accident and stuff. But then I think at the time it was really weird looking at old footage of it after Cliff Burton died. A lot of the news reports were like, no one's tougher than Metallica. They're kind of continuing on. Whereas nowadays people be a bit like, Jesus Christ. Yeah.
I know, they're just kind of cracking on without him and not taking a break.
Years ago, like being up at your house and you had that Metallica documentary on, and I was only like, I don't know, 10 or 11, and like that part comes on where it's like, yeah, and then we were all on the bus, and then this happened, and then he died, and you're just like, what?
I know, but the terrible thing is, like, I mean, they are still, even how many, 30 odd years later, even longer, they're still bloody genuinely traumatized by the whole thing. Like, I mean, Kirk Hammett can't talk about it still without tearing up. Like, any interview,
best friend, and like, I mean, they're only like in their early 20s.
I know, he's only 24 when he got killed, like with the whole crash thing, but
that's
it is
rough.
As well, like Cliff Burton is all over this album, and like he's the only one out of a lot of them that was classically trained musician. And they're always, no one could ever figure out why did he choose to play the bass, because he can play loads of different instruments.
He's a talented guitar player and all the rest.
But like the stuff that he did with the bass, like on Orion and a few other bits, it's just beyond. Like, I mean, For Whom the Bell Tolls, that intro is. And it was something
that he had in his head since he was like 15 years old, kind of a thing. So imagine being that talented, and imagine being able to just spew that kind of stuff out on a whim.
But it's crazy. But I suppose getting into the actual tracks, then kind of like, I suppose, we'll go through one at a time.
Track by track. I mean, how about that for an opener? Battery.
Yeah, Battery.
Like, I mean, you have that sort of, you have the nice soft guitars lulling you in, falls kind of a sense of security, and you're kind of like, oh, nice gentle guitar tracks, and then fucking crashing open.
Battery.
Yeah.
And it's funny, some people think that it's a song about violence and this and that, but
It's a reference to Battery Street.
Battery Street, where they
used to play in
live,
a
and they used to
club
play.
the whole time.
But it kind of is a reference to kind of like aggression and all that.